Guy is a well-known author in France. He's written a number of books about that country's middle and working classes. He recently gave a long interview to a website called Spiked about the yellow vest demonstrations there that have convulsed French society and terrified the French government. Our media haven't said very much about the yellow vests, and that should not surprise you. Ostensibly, their protests are a reaction to global warming taxes and speed cameras. But as Guy explains, what you're actually watching is a revolt against a deeply selfish and stupid establishment, and that very much includes the media. Listen to his analysis here and ask yourself if it sounds at all familiar. Quote, 15 years ago, I noticed that the majority of working class people actually live very far away from the major globalized cities, far from Paris, Lyon, and Toulouse, and also very far from London and New York. Technically, our globalized economic model performs well. It produces a lot of wealth, but it doesn't need the majority of the population to function. It has no real need for the manual workers, laborers, and even small business owners outside of the big cities. Paris creates enough wealth for the whole of France, and London does the same in Britain. But you cannot build a society around this. What the Yellow Vest protesters have in common is they live in areas where there's hardly any work left. They know that even if they have a job today, they could lose it tomorrow and they won't find anything else. They're also culturally misunderstood by the elite. One illustration of this cultural divide is that most modern progressive social movements and protests are quickly endorsed by celebrities, actors, and the media and intellectuals, but none of them approve of the Yellow Vests. Their emergence has caused a kind of psychological shock to the cultural establishment. It is exactly the same shock that the British elites experienced with the Brexit vote, and that they are still experiencing now, 3 years later. Many voters wanted to remind the political class that they exist. That's what French people are using the Yellow Vests for, to say, we exist. We are seeing the same phenomenon in populist revolts across the world. All the growth and dynamism is in the major cities, but people cannot just move there. The cities are inaccessible, particularly thanks to mounting housing costs. The cities have become very unequal, too. The Parisian economy needs executives and qualified professionals. It also needs workers, predominantly immigrants, for the construction industry and catering, etc. Business relies on this very specific demographic mix. The problem is that the people outside the cities still exist. The non-urban population actually encompasses the majority of French people. We have a new bourgeoisie, but because they are very cool and progressive, it creates the impression that there is no class conflict anymore. It is really difficult to oppose the hipsters when they say they care about the poor and about minorities, but actually, they are very much complicit in relegating the working classes to the sidelines. Not only do they benefit enormously from the globalized economy, but they've also produced a dominant cultural discourse which ostracizes working class people. Think of the deplorables evoked by Hillary Clinton. There is a similar view of the working class in France and Britain. They are looked upon as if they are some kind of Amazonian tribe. The problem for the elites is that this is a very big tribe. The reaction to the Yellow Vests has been telling in France. Immediately, the protesters were denounced as xenophobes, anti-Semites, and homophobes. The elites present themselves as anti-fascist and anti-racist, but this is merely a way of defending their class interests. It is the only argument they can muster to defend their status, but it's not working anymore. Now the elites are afraid. A lot has been made of the fact that the Yellow Vest demands vary a great deal, but above all, it is a demand for democracy. Fundamentally, they want to be taken seriously, and they want to be integrated into the economic order. We need a cultural revolution, particularly in the universities and in the media. They need to stop insulting the working class, to stop thinking of them as imbeciles. Cultural respect is fundamental. There will be no economic or political integration until there is cultural integration. Then, of course, we need to think differently about the economy. That means dispensing with neoliberal dogma. We need to think beyond Paris, London, and New York. End quote. Well, if you found yourself, as you heard that, thinking that Guy was talking about your country, not France, there's a reason. In many ways, he was. Imagine what it would look like if our Republican leaders understood what you just heard. They might start winning elections.